And I give the call to the member for Indi.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I welcome the contribution of my colleague, the MP for Mallee, and the great work that he does in his community and his real concern for the river. Thanks for your comments. Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm pleased to speak to the bill, but by way of introduction I'd like to inform the House that 50% of the water that falls in the Murray Darling Basin falls in the electorate of Indi. And this figure has been verified by a number of reputable sources, including the Goulburn and Broken Catchment Management Authority and the North East CMA. And this water falls as rain, obviously, but also as snow in the mountains of the Great Australian Alps, and from the Murray Valley to the north of the electorate of Indi down to the Goulburn in the south. Indi is in fact a watershed electorate, and Indi is a catchment electorate. It's the catchment for the Murray Darling Basin. Mr Deputy Speaker, this water flows into the rivers and creeks of Indi, the tributaries of the Murray River, and let me name them: the mighty Goulburn, the Broken, the King, the Ovens, the Kiwar, the Mitter, the Dart, and the grandest of all of our rivers, the mighty Murray. And embedded in these valleys and on these rivers are the dams of the Dart, the Hume, Nillacootee and Eildon, the places where we store this environmental water. And right across the electorate, in every community, in every valley, the people care deeply about how our water is used. We care that our water is needed and used efficiently and effectively, that we care that our water is used for the environment and used well. Water is used for farming, for our towns and our regional centres. The water is for our industry and our manufacturers, water for our recreation, water for our wildlife, for our well-being, water to drink, to cook and clean with, for our parks and gardens. We care about its use. And currently, a very large percentage of our water is exported. It's exported to our neighbours in the Mallee. It's exported to the flatlanders. It's exported to the irrigation lands and the cities and towns of South Australia. And it is of use and benefit, I'm sure. However, the rules for this export are outlined for us by this parliament in the rules around the Murray Darling Basin Plan, and they have been well debated, argued, compromises made and agreement reached. And this legislation tonight before the House is proposed to change some of these rules. And following consultation and negotiation with the Minister and relevant staff, I'm pleased to support these changes. But in doing so, I would like to draw attention to a number of issues raised by members of my constituency, issues relevant particularly to the implementation of the plan. These issues centre around the constraint strategies. How will the environmental water get from the rivers and dams of Indi to the environmental sites in the west? Who will bear the cost and how will compensation be made? On the Goulburn River, the Goulburn and Broken CMA is the key authority responsible for this planning. The Murray Darling Basin Authority, with technical support for Goulburn and Broken CMA, is developing a business case for addressing environmental flow constraints along the Goulburn River. And funding for the development of the business case is being provided by the State of Victoria from the Australian Government's Water Special Account as part of implementing the Basin Plan. The development of the business case commenced in May 2015, and a final business case is required to be completed by November 2015. And the business case will assess the feasibility of delivering increased environmental flows along the river to inundate the lower Goulburn River floodplain. Overblank flows would benefit the network of billabongs, wetlands and river red gum forests on the floodplain and the many native animals they support. And what land, businesses and infrastructure could be affected by delivering increased environmental flows. These may include farms, fisheries, caravan parks, roads and bridges. And the option to mitigate or offset potential impacts and their costs. Mitigation options include easements over private property and modifying or building new infrastructure. Mr Deputy Speaker, in the north of the electorate, a similar process will need to be carried out on environmental flows released from the Hume Dam. However, I understand this work has not yet been commenced, and I look forward to working closely with the relevant authorities. Let me proceed by reading a letter from a farmer and community leader from the Yea community in the Shire of Murrindindi, Jan Beer. And Jan Beer expresses her concerns strongly. Dear Cathy, as my federal representative for the electorate of Indi, I'm writing to ask you to make representations to the Minister for the Environment, the Parliamentary Secretary for Water and the Murray Darling Basin Authority regarding my concerns on the constraints management strategy under the Murray Darling Basin Plan. And Jan goes to outline her concerns. 1. The river channel capacity of the Goulburn River at Molesworth in the Upper Goulburn catchment is 9,500 megalitres a day. The MDBA are proposing environmental flows of 20,000 mLs per day, which they describe as small overbank flows, but are in reality more than double the channel full volume. This flow completely inundates the high-value agricultural river flats at Molesworth and cuts access in many other properties downstream. Flows of 15,000 megalitres a day and 20,000 megs a day are totally untenable. 2. No extensive cost-benefit analysis or socio-economic impact study on proposed flooding of the Upper Goulburn catchment has been undertaken. The MDBA have commissioned at least 22 socio-economic reports in the Murray-Darling Basin, and all but one of these reports were on impacts of reduced irrigation, with the other one covering the northern basin. We need it for our community in the A area. 3. The Constraints Management Strategy 2013-2014, page 32, states that during Phase 2 there would be a property-by-property assessment with regard to landholder impacts and mitigation options. The MBDA and Goulburn and Broken Catchment Association have now state there is insufficient time and insufficient money for this to take place, instead saying there will be limited opportunities to work at farm-scale levels. Now, only 2 out of 3 case studies of farmers will occur, and 2 to 3 specialist studies, that is, trout farms and caravan parks. 4. The Victorian Government is required to acquire easements as a mitigation process over land that will be intentionally flooded. Mitigation means to alleviate, lessen the pain or impact. An easement is not mitigation for landholders. It devalues the affected land and total farm value. An easement is in reality mitigation for Murray Goulburn Water and GBCMA, who are government agencies deemed to be legally liable and responsible for damages caused by flooding. Phase 2 of the Constraints Management Strategy states that evaluation and analysis of the proposed project must be based on extensive investigation and research to support the decision-making process. Jan writes that she does not believe that this process, which should demonstrate that the strategy is viable and technically and economically achievable, is being undertaken. As part of the Murray Darling Basin Plan, Jan states this is a multi-billion-dollar project involving the expenditure of taxpayers' money, and she asks who will be liable and responsible when it is found that decision-makers have not been fully informed of all aspects with a detailed risk analysis. Indeed, who will be liable, who will take responsibility, and how will compensation be paid? In conclusion, Mr Deputy Speaker, while I do support this bill, I call on the Minister and Parliamentary Secretary to work closely with farmers such as Jan Beer to clearly and accurately communicate with them, to address their concerns. I call on the Minister and the Parliamentary Secretary to make that special effort to work with catchment farmers, to work with the people of Indi, with the communities right across Indi. After all, it is our water, and it is 50% of all the water in the basement.